And Ethan, I have to say that you kind of called it. There were a
Yeah.
couple episodes ago, I forget when it was, but you were like, here's what the Spurs are going to do. They're not going to trade anybody. There's going to be all these rumors. They're going to end up doing nothing. And then they're going to draft somebody that we've never heard of. And that's exactly what happened in the first round. So, Ethan, I have some things written down, but since I just took up all the time talking to start this thing, I'm going to swing it to you. You were at work. I texted you. I mean, what was your reaction? What were your thoughts on this Josh Primo pick to start?
I'm not gonna lie, Jude. I was at work and I had my phone in my pocket on the draft, so I would pull it out literally every 20 seconds to see. And the Spurs were picking, so I kept it out and I'm like hiding from my manager, watching my phone, and I saw Primo, and I was like, no idea who that is. What position does he play? And I saw a G for guard, and I was like, well, okay. It's like I've never heard of this name. I don't. Granted, I don't follow college basketball, so for people that actually watch college basketball religiously, maybe Joshua Primo was a name that you were familiar with. I had no idea who he was, and then you texted me a little bit about him, like a very brief scouting report saying that he's a guy that averaged 8 and 4. He was a good shooter and a 6'5" guy that could maybe play the 2 or the 1, maybe even the 3. I don't know what the Spurs have planned for him. Um, and I told you this, my initial reaction. I'm not mad. I'm just a little disappointed.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to describe it. I feel like. All right, so I'll give you my thoughts on kind of this whole thing because I wrote down a lot of notes about this, and I have a couple things that like I want to go through. I want to talk about Joe Wieskamp a little bit later too,
Mm-hmm.
but then if you're down with it, I literally like wrote down like every player that we have at every position now at our roster to just kind of let everybody know. Where we're at going into free agency, right? We
Yeah.
did those positional breakdowns. Now we have the draft picks. So it's like now the roster is even more set and we know more. And that's kind of like the first thing that I want to say to all the Spurs fans, despite all of like the disappointment, everything that you feel, after last night, we know like more about the team, whether we like it or not. The good news is we know more about Brian Wright and where they're going with the franchise and what they're at least trying to do this next season, right? Another thing to remember, Brian Wright is a first time GM. He could mess up, he could make mistakes, he could not be that good. This is a possibility. I know the Spurs and Greg Popovich and RC Buford have been fantastic for a very long time. But let me tell you a little story as an LSU fan. Whenever you reach the top and you think you're the best, sometimes you get complacent and just hire numbnutses. It literally happened a year after LSU had the greatest season of all time. And I know that like LSU and the Spurs aren't necessarily the same comparable thing. But all I'm saying is that like the Spurs have been so good for so long, and now RC is moving into this CEO role, right? And then they just we'll just hire Brian Wright because I was looking at his background and I've never looked into it before. All he was like an assistant with the Pistons and the Magic, which aren't two very good franchises. With all of that being said, I'm not going to freak out everybody. Let Brian Wright still may be a good GM. This isn't me saying not, but I'm just saying that he's a first-time GM. That's something that we need to remember.
Yeah.
Two, it's very obvious that the Spurs are playing small ball with these two picks. They're committing to it, whether I like it or not, whether Ethan likes it or not. Most likely, they're playing a little bit more small ball. But
Mm-hmm.
also, that might be like that also might not be true. That might be proven wrong because Brian Wright came out yesterday in an interview because he had a big interview. There were a lot of quotes that came out, and it was talking about how the Spurs are also planning to go after bigs in free agency. So they are addressing that need and they're still planning to, but it's just not through the draft like we expected.
And I do want to say this. I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a
Mm-hmm.
second. You could be very much right, Jude. And I thought about that too. We got to the highest point for 20 something years and we just don't. Maybe we did hire someone that doesn't know what they're talking about. And this could be a mistake. Or who knows? We maybe just got another diamond and we're all really skeptical right now. And I know we all wanted that big splash player, including me, someone who could come in and contribute immediately on the team. And it looks like, as far as like what you said about the interview and some quotes coming out, that he's probably going to play in the G League, our lottery pick in the G League, something that
Yeah.
Spurs fans really aren't excited about. He could become something special. He is a great shooter. He's only 18 years old, the youngest player in the draft. He has a lot of potential. Something that Brian Wright was saying was that he was only 18, and how he played in the combine especially showed him, you know, that he was ready to play against grown men and only had, he can only go up from here. You know what I'm saying? He's not even close to the player that he could potentially become. So we have that to hopefully look forward to. Maybe Josh Primo is someone that we can, he's not going to be our star player in my opinion, but he's a piece that could prove extremely valuable in the future.
So I'm not even ready to put a ceiling on this kid. I know that I just
Mm-hmm.
kind of went on that whole rant, but I didn't even get to go to my Josh Primo things. Okay, let me say this. I immediately tweeted. If some of y'all follow me on Twitter, shout out to follow us on Twitter. I'm gonna put a graphic up later with our ats. But the thing is that when I watch this kid's tape, Ethan, despite all of the like, take the Spurs out of it and just watch his tape. I don't see
Mm-hmm.
anything that I dislike. I watched it, of course, immediately. I was with some friends who are all Spurs fans last night. We immediately put highlights on the TV, and we were just like, all right, well, let's see what this kid is. And there's nothing to hate. There's a lot of stuff, with obviously the structuring of the team and feeling like, Kai Jones or Alperen Sengun or, even Moses Moody or a Trey Mann might have been a better pick. Maybe we could have just waited until the 42nd, or 41st pick and still got this kid in the second round and got somebody, like a Kai Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I mean, there's all that speculation.
Or
And we
trade back even.
and we see you guys in the chat too. We appreciate it. We're gonna get
Mm-hmm.
to it. We're just breaking this down right now. But talking about Josh Primo, he's a shooter. He's a knockdown shooter. I know he's 38%. Some people might be like, oh, that's not the greatest. Look, if you look at his shot, like his stroke, you can tell that he's a pure shooter. And that's a need. He's 6'6", 200 pounds. And Brian Wright, for the criticism I was just giving him, there's another attribute that he also added. He was basically a high school freshman starting in the SEC
High
on
school
the
senior.
SEC, or high school senior. Yeah, not
Yeah.
freshman. A high school senior. My bad. High school senior starting in the SEC. On Alabama, who won the SEC this year. I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure. So yeah, wasn't the best player on the team, but still 18. He has the potential to be great defensively. He's 6'6",
6'11" wingspan.
He's 6'6", 200 pounds, and once again, he's 18. He can grow still. He's
Yeah.
got 7 years of growth left. And just being the youngest player in the draft, remember how I had this little idea, Ethan, where it was more about like Keon Johnson or Moses Moody, and how I was talking about how maybe the Spurs were going to draft a guard to fill Lonnie's spot after this season because he's on the end of his contract this year. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that's what this pick was, but that could very well end up being what happens. If they decide to let Lonnie Walker go after this season, we could be seeing Josh Primo playing as the backup two guard as early as next year after he develops in Austin this entire year. That
Mm-hmm.
could literally be what this pick is, and it's crazy. I didn't think that was going to happen. I kind of was like, this could be a possibility if they wanted to be really weird, and then now we're doing it. But I think he has a ton of upside. I'm not, like, because he's so young, I'm not ready to rule out, like, I'm not ready to put a ceiling on this kid. I know that you could say that, maybe he's just a 3-and-D guy who's a little bit more athletic with some ball handling ability, and that'll really be all he's going to be. But with just how young he is, who knows what this kid could be? I mean, he could really be a player, I feel like. I mean, there's been a lot of other people that really liked him that were out there. Shout out to Through the Wire if y'all watch them on YouTube. I know they're just a bunch of like friends who Kenny Beecham got famous on YouTube, but like still, one of the guys on there was talking about how Josh Primo was like elite, like he was just a bucket. And so I don't know. This is the Spurs. You got to trust the front office, but it's also a
Mm-hmm.
new front office, so you've got to have a little bit of, like skepticism at the same time. You don't want to just be like, oh, this is just the greatest thing ever. So I don't know. I like the pick. I think I'm not ready to put a ceiling, but it still is a little bit disappointing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you've just gotta. And I think the thing that sucks too is just that this kid is now gonna have so much pressure on him when it seems like he's a G League project for right now, just for this year. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, you're right, Jude. And speaking as just like a Spurs fan, not being objective or anything, the reason Spurs Twitter and everyone's kind of going a little nuts at this point is Josh Primo. As much as we like him, right now, as much as we're singing praises about his game,
Somebody says you like the pick. Shake my head.
Well, I
And
mean,
no,
this
no, 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 it's okay. Everybody, look, no, I respect it. I get why people don't like this pick. There's a lot of people who would have. This dude was like projected. The highest he was
Mhm.
projected in any mock draft was 20. So basically, we're having to trust that Brian Wright thinks that this kid's a star and a lot better than everybody. We're basically having to trust that we're smarter than everybody else right now. And a lot of
Mhm.
times, whenever it's 29-1,
Yeah,
you're the wrong. So I get the concern, but also there's so much upside, and he like in 3 years he's going to be Keldon's age, and like this gives
yeah.
the opportunity. We're not going to win the championship this year anyway. This gives the opportunity to the young guys, which I am happy about. That's what this pick tells me, is that we're going to play Lonnie Walker this year
Mhm. It also told
consistently.
me, I didn't think about this until today, but he could be Patty replacement. You
Yeah, he
know,
even could be that, even though he's six
yeah,
six.
because he's really a guy that can come off some screens, play off ball, and knock down some threes. And he fills a need that the Spurs desperately needed, which was a 3-point shooter that can also play defense, something that Patty never really was capable of doing, even though he tried very, very hard. And my last point about this pick, you got to trust the front office, even though it seems like we reached pretty pretty heavily to go get this
Mm-hmm.
guy, but they know a lot more about basketball than we do. At the end of the day, they probably saw something that we just haven't seen. And
That's the other thing. We're not in those workouts. We're not in
exactly,
those draft meetings. We're not at the combine seeing what he's doing in 3-on-3s, which is apparently what really impressed them. It was like basically they thought he was a spot up shooter, and apparently he was just a crazy playmaker at the draft. And the Spurs GMs weren't the only GMs that were blown away by him at the combine.
easy. Trey Jones is supposed to be Patty's replacement. Yes, as far as like being a point guard off the bench, I'm looking at the comments.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
but I'm
he's
talking about just like a guy that can come off the ball and shoot is what I mean. As far as the role, not necessarily the position. You're right. Trey Jones should be our backup point guard, at least next year.
Yeah, and another thing, shout out to ML Miles One and Eric Pacina. They made some great points. He can be great in 3 years,
Yeah.
and we have been spoiled. And ML Miles One also says stash Primo for 2 years and get him ready to be the guy behind DJ and Derek. I'm not mad at that. I think he can. The cool thing is with Josh Primo is even though we already have like four of these, is actually I don't know if we have like four of these, but I think y'all get what I'm saying. He can play the 1 through 3. He really can play 1 through 3, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So,
We went versatility and shooting this draft,
which
which
is exactly what Brian Wright said in his
yeah,
yeah. So, any final thoughts on Josh?
just give him time, Spurs
Yep.
fans. Give him time. I know we're upset. We wanted someone that could contribute, tomorrow, but just give him time. Give him
Yeah.
time.
One more thing on him. His number one preferred destination was the Spurs. He said he wasn't expecting to go 12, but he said he was really happy that it was San Antonio. So he wants to be here. That's going to be huge. Meanwhile, DeJounte Murray is tweeting the yikes emoji. So we're going to have to see what happens with that. I put up the Ginobili jersey. You can kind of still see DeJounte.
Mm-hmm.
That's because I'm not sure how long the DeJounte jersey would last.